Okay, thank you very much, Andrew, for your introductions, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. And I was listening to Mr. Lam's speech, opening note. It was very inspiring, and it's a good way to introduce everyone to Hong Kong again. And I think it's a good marketing. Thank you very much. And I should say, hello Hong Kong, to all visitors. This is our theme. I think you forgot that. Anyway, we have a valuable guest and good friend on stage today, and I'm very honored to chair such a wonderful panel. And I'm sure we will have a very lively conversations. In fact, I prepared a long speech about trying to set the scene for this discussion, but Parash already have done my job. So I have to truncate all of these and getting our what we expect in 2023. We expect recovery in the dry bulk markets to be driven by larger ships. Gear segment may struggle a little bit over the past few months due to softer demand in China, but it should be stabilized during the second half of the year. Supply-demand balance is likely to tighten and moving towards the end of the year and into 2024. We expect more broad-based recovery should reflect a stronger market and earning. So when we see the sell and purchase and newbuilding market also reflect the same, we have seen more activities after the beginning of the year when dip. So with all these words, I think I should leave the discussion to the panel. So I'm amongst friends here, I'm very comfortable. So the first question to be the gentleman next to me, Captain Chang, how are you? No mic. Good morning. It's all about China. So we start with China, right? So the macroeconomics data out of China has been very positive. It looks like the COVID-related disruption is largely over. And this reflects on high-frequency data such as mobility number. People are out and about, traveling abroad and traveling for leisure and business. How do you see Chinese demand moving forward? Do you think it will be a service-led recovery? Or do you expect industrial activities picking up over the coming months?
Okay, thank you, Ben. I think according to the latest data, we can see the China's economy is gradually recovering. Of course, this first is leading by the service industry. We all know the COVID is over thanks to after 3 years. But at the same time, we also see in the other sectors gradually recovering as well. As per this Chinese national fixed asset investment status for February and January, because of the Chinese New Year, normally we counting February, January together. This year, the fixed national asset investment increased about 5.5%. Within this all those investment, the agricultural industry is increased about 1.5%, and the manufacturing industry increased about 10.5%, and the service industry increased about 3.8%. So from those figures, we can see the industrial activity definitely are recovering very strongly. That means the China's government stimulus policy start to take effective. Also, if we look at the iron ore import figures in first 2 months of this year, it's also recorded about 7 to 8% increase compared with last year. Let's see, in 2021 and 2022, we have seen 2 consecutive year decline for Chinese iron ore import. So we can see that the rebound is quite strong. Also, if we look at the coal import, this also even more than double increase compared with the same period last year. Of course, the coal is slightly different. The import volume is very much affected by the domestic coal price and the international coal price. But in any case, it reflects the strong demand in China. So from my personal view, definitely to the short to medium view, definitely we will see strong demand in China recovery. But in any case, given the China's GDP per capita is already more than $10,000, $12,000 US dollars, So I think the Chinese economic development also enter into a new stage. So we should not expect in the past 20 years, the extensive consumption of the commodity of the Chinese economy. I think that will be gradually ending. We should not have unrealistic hope for that one. If we still want to be the dry bulk transportation demand continue growth, we need more driver engine, maybe like India, Southeast Asia, and other developing countries. That's my personal view.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. I think that's a very optimistic news from China. I also see again during the Chinese New Year, we can see the box office about the movie in China going up. A few movies got billions of dollars of box office, and retail also up 3.5%, and restaurant sales up 9.2%. People out wine and dine. I think it's partly related to the Chinese New Year. Everyone drank Maritime and all these things. So the second questions would be going to Gautam. Thank you for coming all the way from Bangkok. So the market is trying to gauge the possibility of global slowdown these days. How do you see ex-China demand developing over the next 12 months or so? Have you seen the impact of aggressive interest rate hike already, or we are seeing more pain to come? What does this mean to dry bulk shipping? Please.
Thank you. Yeah, so first of all, it's great to be in Hong Kong after so many years. It's great to see Hong Kong reopen. So if you look at dry bulk demand ex-China, so you see that already steel demand in Europe, for instance, or ex-China globally, steel demand, steel production is down to levels that we've seen last in 2016. So that also affects construction materials. So certainly there's an impact of the interest rate hikes. Yeah? However, as a dry bulk is not only does not only comprise commodities which have cyclical demand, it also comprises commodities which have been growing on a secular basis for the last 10 or 15 years, such as grains, fertilizers, forest products, bauxite, etc. Our expectation is that over the next 12 months, the secular growth in these commodities will offset the decline in the trade growth for these cyclical commodities. So therefore, we're expecting overall in one of the key dry bulk cargoes is minor bulk. So we expect that 2023 there will actually be, on a global basis, there should be an increase in minor bulk trade. And then we also look at things like coal. So coal has really benefited a lot from the energy crisis in Europe. It's a trend that should continue as long as, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war continues. Once that war comes to an end, we would expect that the demand driver will change. It will probably be for rebuilding Ukraine. That should increase potentially, again, construction demand, construction material demand, steel demand, etc.
Thank you, Gautam. So we stick to China for the time being. So I would like to ask Mr. Low for the next questions. So one of the biggest drags on China's economy and imports of the dry bulk commodity has been the property market. As we all know, it is a very commodity-intensive sector, steel in particular. So do you think the government effort to revive this sector will work? Number two, do you think there will be a rebound in the market, in that market? Number three, or we are at the beginning of a new era where property is not considered as an attractive and safe investment in China anymore. I know this is a rather controversial and difficult question. That's why I asked you.
Thank you, Benny. Yes, it's not an easy easy question to answer. I think Paresh in his presentation mentioned that China's GDP growth this year is estimated to be 5 to 6%. And property sector, real estate or related sector in general account for 20 to 30% of China's GDP. So with that in perspective, with the strong efforts by the government to try to revive the property sector, we are seeing early signs of recovery. And so far, year to date, the numbers are starting to rebound from last year. I think in general, property sector is very commodity intensive. So with the recovery we are seeing this year, that should be good for dry bulk in general. I think the key question is whether the property sector rebound is sustainable. It's very obvious in the government's new 5-year plan that the growth engine of China going forward are new infrastructure such as data center or 5G, 6G, and new energy and also consumptions. So property going forward probably is not the growth engine in China. But having said that, because China's GDP today is over 18 trillion US dollars. So 20-30% of that GDP is still a very significant number. So if China can stabilize its property sector, we believe that it will still be very important and very helpful for the dry bulk demand in general. So your third question is whether it's still a good investment. I think in general, that prime location in the major cities, the property sector will still be looking very promising. But in general, the overall property sector in China, I think we will have to be very selective.
Thank you, Mr. Low. I think the demographic changes in, the composition of the, we have more old people, less young people, I think also play a major role on these property market development, right? So let's come to the more specific segment of dry bulk. I have a question for Olivia. So minor bulk trade were the star performer, very good during the past few years, which is explain the performance of gear segment over the past few years. Growth in minor bulk volume outpaced the growth in major bulk. Do you think this trend will continue, and what is driving this growth?
Sure, thanks, Tony. I think when we talk about minor bulks, maybe it's that we're quite generalistic and perhaps we're a bit lazy, because minor bulks make up something like 40% of the dry bulk market, and within that number we have an incredibly diverse range of cargoes, agribulks, forestry products, grains, fertilizers, etc. And all those cargoes have quite a diverse experience of their own. So you see growth in particular markets where other markets are struggling. And there's a lot of diversity within the cargo base, within the customer base, within the vessels that trade it. So the beautiful thing as a minor bulk trader, like a handy-sized player, is that you can pivot between the different cargoes and try to maximize value where you can. Having said that, I think I agree with what Gautam was saying earlier, that minor bulk remains a very important story and probably a more positive story. More correlation with Southeast Asian economies as well as Chinese economies. So that again leads into our diversity story, that there are different trade routes developing, and as things change we see more inefficiency. Inefficiencies and changes in trade routes aren't necessarily a bad thing for shipping. So I think overall probably very positive, lot of opportunity, but certainly some headwinds as well in terms of interest rate hikes, the current uncertainty in the banking market. So overall I'd say positive with some areas and some bumps in the road ahead.
Excellent. Good to hear from owner's point of view. They're also optimistic about the, I shouldn't say minor bulk. I understand that we are very different segment within the minor bulk banks, and it's totally different than the handy-sized market, right? So which is, I think you're so right about it is a very Southeast Asia oriented market, and then it is where the growth we can see here. So the next question, I haven't asked Stephen a question yet. So Stephen, so one of the most anticipated impact on these regulations these days will likely be slow steaming. You have seen global dry bulk fleets slowing down in the past few months. Do you think this is due to market forces or low earning, high bunker cost, or it is an influence of the regulation as well?
Yeah, I would say definitely over the past 4 to 5 months, it's definitely been due to the market conditions. Bunker prices have been relatively high, whereas earnings have decreased significantly. And this has caused people to go ahead and slow steam just for our earnings perspective. Now, when we speak about regulations, I don't think anyone has taken any steps in slowing or adjusting their speeds to be improving their CII rating. Definitely charters, for good or bad, are not contributing to this, whether it is clauses, I think we'll speak about the clause later, but there is resistance from many of these household names that they are not willing to allow owners to be there to dictate how they will trade the vessels that they're chartering. And this is a little bit of a tricky situation, but what will happen is probably as we get closer to the end of the year, speeds may be adjusted due to owners restricting what their warranted speeds are, just in preparation for the CII ratings that they will have to deal with in 2024. But it is but right now it's a little bit frustrating, one, because the CII regulation is maybe not as applicable for the dry bulk trades in terms of encouraging ballasting, etc. But at the same time of not getting the participation from larger charters to agree to specific clauses that allow owners to adjust speeds when and where required.
Thank you, Stephen. I think it is anticipated because when we try to persuade owners to order or buy ships, we think this year, that will be the year because of the CII or the slow steaming, then the supply side of the formula of any ships will decrease. So I think it matches with our expectation. So we have a Capesize owner here. So go back to Mr. Low. So we have seen bauxite shipments out of West Africa growing strongly over the past few years, almost doubling its share in the Capesize market. Do you see your trades as well? Have you been lifting more bauxite during the past few years?
Yes, definitely. We have seen more bauxite trading from West Africa to Asia, and that has been increasing quite a bit, especially in 2022. And especially they are using the Newcastle-Max, which is a bigger vessel with scrubber, so that has been quite helpful on that front. And with more bauxite mine coming up, I think that trend will continue going forward.
So question, go back to Gautam. So during pandemic boom, we have seen the gear segment benefiting from the spillover from container ship sector, right? So those cargoes on container box rate too high, they come back to handy size or Supermax, even bigger ships, right? Do you see this trend, this cargo leaving the sector and going back to container shipping?
Yeah, so I've not seen any data to quantify how much cargo has switched between the two sectors, but what we've seen anecdotally is cargoes like rice and sugar and scrap. These are sort of swing cargoes, and so they have, we know that this year container rates being so low, they have moved back to box ships. It clearly doesn't make too much of a difference. Our estimate is that the total ton mile for these switching cargoes is certainly much less than 1%. And I think the evidence is also in the handy size and the Ultramax rates, which continue to be quite healthy now, despite switching from dry bulk to container.
Okay, thank you. So I think the surplus in container ship is what we are anticipating, and I think there will be more room for them. Is that what you're thinking?
I don't think there'll be any more switching. From what we understand, most of that switching is already taken place.
Already done?
Yeah.
Okay, clear. Thank you. So Olivia, talking about the sanctions, right? Sanctions has a huge impact on shipping last year, not just in dry bulk shipping, but also in tankers trade. How do you see the sanction landscape playing out during the next 12 months? Have you seen how do you see client deal with these issues on the country?
I think compliance is a very interesting area at the moment because leaving aside Russia, I think you would say that post the Trump administration, the compliance landscape and sanctions landscape improved significantly. The Biden administration made sanctions much more transparent, easy to understand. They were much more willing to engage with owners and owners, counterparts, businesses as to what compliance meant. So from that perspective, I think that compliance has improved, but obviously that's leaving aside Russia. Now we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which is the first time in some time we've had such a a blanket set of sanctions come in. And I think we're on the 10th round of announcements from OPEC, which are just increasingly tightening the perspective with Russia. You said, you mentioned dry bulk. I think the Russian sanctions have really bitten much harder on the tanker side than on the dry bulk side. But obviously, as a dry bulk owner, when we talk about sanctions, we talk about America, because the UK, the UN, the EU, they have sanctions regimes. They don't enforce them in the way that the Americans do, and they are usually, not usually, uniformly not as strict as the US sanctions. So definitely owners are struggling with the amount of the administrative burden in compliance. We're struggling with the fact that the sanctions landscape is changing all the time. So if you trade today with somebody who's to say that tomorrow that another round won't come in and they are sanctioned, I think that you have to draw a distinction between the legal framework of sanctions and what's actually happening in the industry. Because people are so uncertain about what's happening with US sanctions, they are self-sanctioning in a way that we haven't seen before necessarily. And that doesn't just apply to ship owners, that applies to our financing partners, to our underwriters, to our P&I clubs. Many people are taking the risk appetite that they just will not trade certain locations at all. And that's obviously having a huge impact on the market as well in terms of trades and driving up premiums where trades are being performed. I think one positive thing that we can see coming out of this is that the humanitarian crisis in Europe and in Russia is prompting the US to become a little bit more transparent about how they're implementing sanctions and where they're going next. So at the moment in the dry bulk sector, we're seeing movement on the fertilizer side and increased clarification about when we can trade fertilizers. And I understand that on the tanker side, there is a lot of pressure on the price cap. The US is becoming more interventionist with ship owners to say, you can actually do these trades. But I mean, that's not an area I'm expert in. But I think those are positive developments.
Please do that. I think all the industry, including tanker industry, we have to look at that and try to maneuver along the risk and then see how it goes along. Let's go to Captain Chen. Captain Chen, the next question with regarding new building. When the order book near historically lows, rising fleet renewal pressure is on. With the improving fundamental, we should have seen a lot more ordering, right? But comparatively, we haven't seen that much ordering happening compared to the 2006-07 boom. I mean, the new building ordering on dry bulk is very minimal. So do you think this is the technologically uncertainty is dragging the reason behind the low ordering? What do you think the factor is keeping the low ordering of new buildings?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, the technology uncertainty, mainly from my view, is how to choose the automatic fuel. It's playing a very important factor for the owners. They feel very hardly to determine what will be the fuel. Among this one, in addition, I think there are also any other factors affect the owner's decision for the new orders, like we already discussed the very high interest rate, and also expensive asset, and also even come to the shipyard, the berth is not much berth slot available. So many things I think affect the ship owner's decision. But from my view, the most important factor still what is the owner's perspective for the future transportation demand. Because we can see if in certain small segments, if the transportation demand is very firm and clear, the owner still keep placing the order, like we have seen in the LNG sector, in the PCTC, also in the container vessel fleet. So I think the key still people is do not have the confidence for the future demand, sustainability of the demand. Otherwise, all the difficulty we can overcome. This is from my view. Secondly, I have a slightly different opinion. From my view, in the dry bulk sector, the outlook is not that low from my view. First, why we call it historical low? Because we have historical high. That high is
That's why I say relatively.
yeah. Well, that high is maybe irrational, is irresponsible high outlook. Then give us very hard 10 years in the past. So we need to think about. I think we need to think about. From my view, the current outlook is very reasonable outlook. Yeah. Some.
Yeah. I don't want to interrupt, please.
Yeah. First, if we're talking about the outlook, we already said many shipyards is full. So that means the outlook and the shipyard capacity, there is a balance there. Another one is again, since as the analyst also mentioned, this year the outlook of the world economy is not that great. It's not that great. So we need to be very cautious when we think about placing the new order. And also, my view is as a very critical connector of the world commodity trade, dry bulk shipping play a very important role. We render good support to ensure the whole logistic chain can run smoothly for around the world. And also we are facing many challenges, like the environmental challenges, the new technology challenges, and also shortage of the talent in our industry. I think the dry bulk ship owner should have received very reasonable or even very good return on their investment. But that is not the case in past 10 years. So I hope all the ship owners will keep this kind of the order book ratio continuous. Then enable we can have some result. Then we invest for the new technology. Then we invest for the talent. We invest for the environment. Then we can continue for next decade, continues to provide the cleaner, more efficient, and more safer transportation to support the whole world economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Chen. So I think the driver market is the most competitive market, free market. The barrier of entry is the lowest amongst our shipping industry. And when I saw the disciplined ship owners have been practicing over the past 24 or 36 months, even they have a lot of money, good earning, which I'm quite impressed. Actually, I mean, perhaps it's partly have to be done with the technological uncertainty, but I think this, in a way, is good. And also the shipyard has merged and the supply side of the formula. I mean, as Captain Chang has said, the berth availability have been occupied by PCTC, container ship, and tankers orders. So that's perhaps a part of the reason going with this result, right? So I think the following question is an open to everyone to answer. Perhaps I ask Gautam first. So as an owner, where do you see future propulsion?
Yeah, so for us, I think the most promising propulsion systems are one which would really solve the problem of carbon emissions completely. So that being, for us, that would be ammonia. And if you look at what the industry is doing, the maximum number of prototype projects that are happening for these zero-emission vessels are ammonia-propelled vessels. So this is an area that we think there should be some breakthrough. We think at the latter part of this decade. The other very promising one is carbon capture and storage. Of course, the advantage of here is that you can continue to use the same technology, the same types of engines, continue to burn the same fuel oil. We are less convinced about, for instance, methanol. For the simple reason it doesn't really cut your emissions very much, and it also adds to cost, and it's cost that really can't be passed on. And LNG as well, we are not. We don't think it's a solution for dry bulk, because when you consider a methane slip and you look at the well-wake emissions, it's not a very good view.
Okay, Olivia?
Yeah, I think there is not a real solution out there at the moment, a global solution. I mean, all these solutions that we're talking about, ammonia, methanol, we still aren't seeing, scale of production for green methanol at a rate that we would move to order a methanol ship. And it was interesting, there was a conference recently in New York where the panel spent a significant amount of time talking about nuclear power as a propulsion method. And I think that indicates, the fact that we don't have a solution, that we are talking about something like nuclear, which is quite a long way from that. But I also think this is a dry bulk panel, so I think dry bulk, we expect dry bulk to be the last mover. We'll see the large ships dock first, and we'll see the various issues being ironed out in terms of supply, in terms of fueling, in terms of storage on board, before we make a move. So it's definitely something that we're paying a lot of attention to, but I think recent regulations have probably taught us that there's not an advantage in the dry bulk space, especially in a smaller vessel size, to be a first mover.
I think we need technology to improve how to make green methanol. Right? We need a big solar panel in all the desert and how to pipe it to the port to supply to a ship. But I think it is a tall order for the time being. Right? So I can see Kevin give me this sign. Is it 5 minutes or 15? 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. So I'll come to the last question to Stephen. Okay. So FFA volume have been rising steadily over the past 2-3 years, and last month, February, we saw the largest volume trade since 2008. Volatility has reached increasingly, right? So do you think the paper trade has lost its predictive power? Is it being used more speculative than hedging these days? What do you think, Stephen?
Well, it's a pretty complex question because it's kind of all of the above in many ways. And if we look at the physical side and how people are pricing, whether they're buying a vessel, when I say buying, taking a vessel on long-term charter for 1 year or so, or if they're selling forward freight, you see the players sometimes discouraging and encouraging deals on the base of what paper is doing that day. And sometimes they're playing both sides of the coin. So it does, in intraday movements and a lot in the nearby, it does feel like there's a lot of speculators involved. And I kind of like to not coin something, but you have a lot of people with no cargo to move or no steel to hedge that are getting involved in these trades now, which sometimes distorts values. In the end, okay, every month paper is settled on the Baltic average for each specific class or segment, but at the same time we are seeing these non-shipping related parties being involved in creating volatile movements that can affect ripples in the sense that all of a sudden there has been short squeeze involved in paper trading for vessels, and which is something that maybe 10 years ago was less so. So the ratio of speculators are increasing, and maybe that's your follow-on question. But I think one of the positive sides is liquidity is increasing, right? And on the smaller segments, when we get into the super side, not so much handy, but I think it is important for the geared owners and the charters to have the opportunity to participate in a way that they can hedge their exposure, whatever side they're on. But I think one of the things that is a little bit of concern, if there is a increased number of speculators involved, and you have a lot of traditional owners or small-scale cargo movers trying to get into the paper trade, they may lose confidence in how it's being priced. And I think that's something that is maybe not at the surface yet, but it does exist. And I think it could create, it will not stop the momentum, but maybe it will not have the activity from, again, people that have cargo to move or steel to hedge to be more involved in.
Thank you, Stephen. I think including hedge funds, they are also in the game now, right?
Yeah, that's a speculator. So they are the speculator of the world.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you.